Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Wavelength.
You know, Adelaide has worked really hard over the last few years to build a small bar reputation. When I was a kid, the big night in Adelaide was kind of, staying at home and watching the bill.
Sparking the combos about Adelaide.
As a female Sparky, I did get lots of comments on my gender.
You should be having...
Here to make a difference. Yeah, make the difference. Give the youth a voice.
On Fresh 92.7.
Welcome to Wavelength with David and Hamish, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. How's your week been, man?
Yeah, not too bad. But I'll tell you what, I'm feeling a little bit disheartened at the moment, a little bit despondent.
What's that for?
After hearing that New Zealand has recorded the first new cases after 100 days.
I know, what's going on?
Dude, you were supposed to be the chosen one, New Zealand.
They were meant to be leading the way and just winning for all of us. Apparently not, though.
Yeah, so surely, all hope is lost now, right? Now really is the time to start panicking.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I think we're in agreement of that. The end times truly are upon us now. But anyway, this week we've got a great show ahead of us. So this week on Wavelength, we'll be exploring how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the mental health of young Australians. With more than half of young people in Australia saying their mental health is worse for wear now than before the pandemic, we'll look into what help is out there for those of us who've lost a bit of confidence.
We'll also be letting you know everything you need to know about the coronavirus. But next, Arj will be asking whether we should be teaching sign language in schools.
Wavelength.
I don't know about you, Hamish, but I've never really had to actually learn sign language in my entire life, nor have I ever really had the opportunity to do so. And it sort of seems like I've totally missed out on some sort of important life skill.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have done a couple of Auslan classes back when I was working at a cafe, and we employed a deaf girl, and so that we could interact with her and work alongside her, we did a bit of training in that. And yeah, honestly, it was a really great experience, and it's not as hard as you think, really. Yeah. I think it's something we should definitely be focusing more on in early development learning and stuff like that, when it's a lot easier for kids to soak up that kind of information. But look, the only phrase I can still remember how to sign is, would you like, yes, I would like more fries with that, which surprisingly will get you actually quite far in most social interactions. So, yeah.
I wish you could just do it over the radio somehow. But, I mean, there's clearly plenty more that, Australia or, that I personally could be doing to be more inclusive to the hard of hearing and the deaf in today's society. So she went to chat with Caroline, who's voiced here by her interpreter Pip, about what more we could all be doing.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
When we think of someone living with a disability, it's often easy to fail to recognise those who don't have a disability that's visually obvious. When it comes to the hearing impaired, it's easy to forget to take them into account and make them feel like a valued and recognised people in community. We here as a radio station are solely hearing media. We understand how easy it is to fall into that habit. Today we'll be speaking to Caroline, voiced by her interpreter Pip, on how we can be more inclusive to the deaf community. Caroline was born deaf and was raised in Sydney before moving to Adelaide, where she now works as a Auslan instructor. Caroline, as someone who was born deaf, how did you find going to school when you were younger?
It was difficult because I had to rely on lip reading the teacher, and sometimes the teacher would turn around to face the board as she was writing, she would speak. So it was very difficult to participate in discussions in the classroom. There was a lot of information that I missed out on, and that did have a big impact on my learning.
And how did you find making friends amongst your peers?
In primary school, really at that age, we just played. There wasn't so much conversation. Conversation wasn't such an important part of friendships in primary school. But at high school, that did become an issue because amongst girls of that age, really how they do friendship is in conversation. So I often felt quite isolated. And now looking back, I wonder, was it harder in the classroom or was it harder outside in the playground? And I think really it was the social aspect outside in the playground that had the biggest emotional impact on me.
Now, I'm not going to try and guess your age, but I'm assuming you went to school a number of, let's go with decades ago. How has things changed in hearing schools since then?
Well, thank you. You're being very, very nice. So mainstream schools I mean, there are still deaf students attending mainstream schools now, but there are many also that have bilingual programs where they are taught in both languages, both written English and Auslan. And they still have some schools that do have a specific focus on deaf education. It doesn't mean they're a special school. They might just be an ordinary school, but they have an instructor who is fluent in Auslan.
The Duke of Brunswick is a pub here in Adelaide that took it upon themselves to train their staff in conversational Auslan. What does it mean to you as a person who is deaf?
I really take my hat off to the Duke of Brunswick. They've been very proactive, learning Auslan so that they can include members of the deaf community in their establishment. I think that's brilliant, the way that they're providing access. So a deaf person, I can go in there and order a drink in my own language. And if other places could take a leaf out of their book, it would really, the deaf community would soon tell each other about it. This place is fantastic, all the staff there signed. That place is fantastic, all the staff there signed. We'll go there.
We discussed a little bit before off air about a school in I think it was Port Pirie, who have Auslan as their language other than English, their LOTE. Could you just talk briefly about that school and what it sort of means to you as a deaf person?
So this school is based in Port Pirie. It's Arndale Primary School. And 3 years ago, they selected Auslan as their second language in the school. So I've been involved in training them, the staff. So in my role at Deaf Can Do, I go there to train the staff, and then the staff embed Auslan in their classroom activities. And for me, as a member of the deaf community, looking at that, I think fantastic, good on them, because that school doesn't even have any deaf students. There are no deaf staff there, nothing. So that's even more impressive. You might hear of schools that perhaps have a deaf student, and some of the staff at that school will choose to learn Auslan because they've got a deaf student. But this school just chose Auslan because they wanted to show the deaf community that they are recognised in Australia.
Do you think that Auslan should be added to the national curriculum?
Well, I'm a deaf person who uses Auslan as my preferred language, and I'm a member of the deaf community, so of course I would say yes. That would definitely be good.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me. Is there anything else that you would like to briefly add before we sign off?
No, I'd just like to thank you, Arch. I'd like to say it's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and I'd like to thank you for the type of questions that you've asked me as a deaf person, because people might have a lack of awareness. I might get asked things like, can deaf people drive? Can deaf people get married? So I'd really like to thank you for your very open and informed approach to providing this information to the wider community. So thank you.
Wavelength, sparking the combos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Arj exploring what more we could be doing to help the deaf in Australian society. Some pretty fantastic insights there, especially from his chat with Caroline.
Anyway, coming up after the break, we'll be getting into a lead story for the night about supporting your mental health during the pandemic.
Wavelength.
I don't know about you, Hamish, but this whole global pandemic thing has got me feeling a bit worse for wear.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, you're really not alone there, David, either. So new research has found that half of Australian young people have seen their mental health deteriorate over the last few months. And yeah, look, who can really blame them?
I know, that's right. Yeah, it's certainly becoming almost like a health crisis, pretty much as bad as the one that's forcing us to spend way more time inside this year. Amy spoke with Headspace about the problem.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
So my mental health during COVID was quite complicated. I lost my job and I had to move back home. There was definitely lots of ups and downs.
I found lockdown hard because I lost my job and was home unemployed for a while.
Coronavirus has affected my mental health because I used to live in Melbourne and now I live in Adelaide. My life is very, very different, but more financially stable, meaning I'm a lot less stressed.
Positives and negatives. Helped studying at home, but also sucked not being able to see my mates at the pub.
I had to move a couple of times, which was quite unsettling.
If you're feeling a bit worse for wear since the whole COVID thing started, you're definitely not alone. Like thousands of other young people, I found myself unemployed in March, and I'd be lying if I said that didn't have an impact on my mental health. Headspace has recently shone a light on the impact COVID has actually had on people's mental health after surveying 2,000 young people aged 15 to 25 and their parents. This research found 40% of young respondents felt the pandemic had impacted their confidence, and 51% of all respondents felt their mental health had got worse during this period.
You know, we are just humans, and we're going to feel shit through these really uncertain times, and it is completely normal to feel that way. I think feeling anxiety and depression is somewhat quite human. And so I think the first thing I like to say is what you're going through, it is normal. So COVID's so interesting because it's really impacted everyone in a very substantial way and a very different way for each individual person. And to me, it makes complete sense with Headspace finding in these statistics, because a lot of parents are getting severely impacted. People are losing jobs. People are losing their livelihoods, their communities, their hobbies. And so the impact is felt quite greatly on a supportive role, such as a parent. So the responsibility makes sense that, well, if my job is going, if my job's gone or if my livelihood is gone, my kids are going to be more affected. Whilst kids who are still affected by this, young people in general are still affected quite heavily by COVID. It's just interesting to see that young people aren't as affected as what people are thinking.
That's Jack, the Intake Officer and Youth Engagement Officer at Headspace Port Augusta. He says the different levels of responsibility and decision-making between young people and their parents is a big factor in why each are coping differently with COVID.
I found significantly at the start of the first lockdown in South Australia that kids were doing okay. They were able to get through. It was at the end of the first lockdown that a lot of kids came out with, a lot of serious mental health conditions. They were coming out with things that they've never dealt with before. And they were able to get back to baseline with a bit of therapy and a bit of time and a bit of connection back to their community. But parents seem to have just, a more substantial way of trying to kind of worry about this situation, worry about things outside of their control more than.
Jack is part of the Flying Headspace program, flying to work with young people in remote South Australian communities. Interestingly, he's seen a difference in the way young people from the city are coping with COVID compared to those living in rural and remote communities.
From my perspective, young people are dealing with COVID in all kinds of manners. I find actually the closer you get to the city, it seems that kids are starting to deal with COVID more intensely. Now, there have been some communities out there that life has significantly changed for, that there were some communities that were locked down, and those communities, young people did do it quite tough. And I've worked with a couple of young people to help them kind of come out of depression or anxiety or those yucky feelings. Those kids were severely affected, but overall, it seems to be that country kids seem to be used to the isolation that COVID brings, the physical isolation that COVID brings.
Wavelength, sparking the combos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Amy chatting with Jack from Headspace about the ongoing mental health crisis affecting 1 in every 2 young Australians right now. Pretty high number of people. That's 50%. I think, I know it's probably not funny, but the girl who said that she had to move from Melbourne to Adelaide, which...
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah. That'll hit you hard. Yeah, I mean, I was off for 2 weeks, which isn't really that much compared to a lot of other people I know, especially in the hospitality industry. But yeah, I was at home for 2 weeks, pretty much just bunkered down inside with 2 young kids. And dude, it was rough. Yes. It was really rough. So I can't imagine how some of the other people out there who, especially people in Victoria or people who've lost their jobs for even longer, have been affected. It's easy to see, and especially with those kids in the city, like those regional kids are probably a bit more used to, as I said, that kind of isolation. But kids in the city, they're used to going out every weekend, seeing their friends all the time, like so much of their lives revolves around getting out of the house and being around other people.
Yeah, I found that sort of talk about how young people just have that sort of sense of hopelessness really interesting compared to like older people who like have the, I guess, money, the life experience to deal with something like this.
Yeah.
I mean, like no one really has the life experience to deal with this because none of us have lived through anything like this before. But yeah, I can totally imagine that. I mean, if I was a bit younger, like if I was in uni and I had to like work a job then, and like my job that I would have been doing then, if I was still doing it now, I would have been terrified. Like, I probably would have lost it. And when you're in that sort of precarious position, it's scary, especially when you can't even go to uni, you can't even go to classes, you have to do it all online.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. You're not getting any of the support that you normally do. And I think, for a lot of kids, like a lot of people our age, this is the first time we've gone through anything like this. Obviously, it's the first time any of us have, but some of the older generation, obviously, there have been other hardships. There have been other really tough times throughout history. But let's be real, for a lot of us younger kids, we've had it pretty good in regards to, like how we live and what life has been like for us. And this is the first time that we've really been kind of like blindsided by something that has just completely upended our lives and our habits and everything like that.
Totally. We'll be getting back into that chat about the ongoing mental health crisis in Australia very soon. But right now, let's throw to Hamish to find out what the hell is going on in politics this week.
What the hell is going on in politics at the moment? Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
While the COVID crisis continues to dominate headlines, these are the stories you may have missed. Hundreds of protesters gathered over the weekend to demand the release of 100 asylum seekers currently housed in a Brisbane hotel, despite an earlier ban in the week which was handed down by the Supreme Court. 6 protesters have since been arrested, 2 of whom glued their hands to the nearby main road. The refugees have been brought to Australia from offshore detention centres and allegedly can't even leave their rooms for exercise. Meanwhile, if you're a student, you might want to start hitting the books. The federal government outlined an overhaul to how it will manage subsidies and loans this week, revealing that students who fail half their subjects will be up for the full cost of their studies if they wish to continue. The change is already proving to be controversial, with the Department of Education signalling the strict measures will impact over 2,500 students each year. Also in the news, a Taliban fighter set to be executed this week for the murder of 3 Australian soldiers has now been allowed to walk free. Despite a promise from the president of Afghanistan himself that the sentence would be carried out, the soldier was released as part of an agreement between the US and the Taliban, which could see the beginning of peace negotiations between the two forces. Scott Morrison has indicated he'll be lobbying against the decision, but it's unlikely he'll be successful in preventing their release. Finally, it's been revealed that the Australian government has spent almost $3 million waging war against whistleblowers. The coalition has been slammed for allowing major companies to increase emissions by 1.6 million tonnes. And a new report has found that young people who withdrew their super could end up $100,000 out of pocket by the time they retire. And that's what the hell has been going on in politics this week.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you for that, Hamish. I am just overwhelmed by how much to digest there. I think one thing that really stood out to me was the uni fee, the uni hex changes. I think that is, to me that's just like so disappointing. I think it's
savage,
awful,
isn't it?
It's an awful policy. I mean, people, like uni is hard enough. Like, one, you're going to feel pretty bad when you fail anyway. No one wants to fail because you have to repeat the damn subject anyway.
Yeah.
And 2, like, people fail subjects for a lot of reasons, not because they're not trying. Maybe they had like a really rough time. Maybe something happened in their life that term, that semester, and to have that threat of like a financial burden, like a financial penalty for failing a subject put on top is just insane. Like,
that's what our young people, that's what our youth needs. Like incentivize them through fear. That's really going to work. I mean, look, they're saying the reasoning behind it is because there's about 6% of students every year who end up failing their subjects and obviously not continuing with the study and end up owing, thousands of dollars. So the government's pretending like they're doing this for, our own sake to stop that from happening, to stop that kind of debt being accrued. There was a story, I guess, a landmark case that they're using of a guy who started, I think, 53 different units across 3 or 4 different universities and ended up accruing over $600,000 in HEC stats. He just really went for broke, you know. Surely one of these I've got to pass. But no, it didn't happen for him. So they're kind of using that as their reasoning. But to be honest, I'm not buying it.
I'm not buying it either. It just seems super unfair.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I got through uni fine, but like if I had that hanging over me, like let alone like you have to repeat the subject, which is bad enough. You have to then pay for it as well.
Yeah. Ridiculous. I mean, you know, some people kind of thrive under that pressure, but I feel like most don't.
No, not at all. Well, thank you for the politics wrap this week, Hamish. As I said, so many things to go through, but we've only got a little bit of time. But anyway, guys, stay tuned for part 2 of Amy's story on Australia's mental health crisis.
Wavelength.
Before the break, Amy spoke with Jack from Headspace about the mental health crisis affecting young people in Australia.
But what can we actually do about it? Amy tracked down Erin from Youth Opportunities, an organisation that runs a program to help young people gain confidence and overcome mental health problems. And it's something that's more vital now than ever.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
I'm Erin Fairman. I'm the Chief Executive at Youth Opportunities. Youth Opportunities is a non-profit here in South Australia. We've actually been operating for about 23 years now. We work with young people to build their skills and habits and the confidence so that they can just really go out and live their best lives no matter what challenges they're facing.
You might have heard a bit about Youth Opportunities along the Adelaide grapevine or even seen their work at your local high school. Erin, what about the COVID situation do you think is impacting young people differently?
We're lucky enough to have our own in-house research and development arm, the Marshman Foundation. And Nikki Brand, who heads that area, is a big believer in increased uncertainty for young people is a big issue, perceived loss of control with so much going on. And we hear about climate change anxiety and how can you even make a drop of difference, and social disconnection, which people like Dr. Fiona Kerr, who's an amazing Adelaide doctor who speaks globally on neurophysiological effects of the differences between when we interact physically in close proximity versus, say, over technology. They are different. Our bodies give off chemicals, our brains are forming differently in those situations. And of course, young people being digital natives, they grew up around technology, they are genuinely missing out on some of those physiological changes and differences.
Erin says the automation of services like self-serve checkouts or ATMs is also impacting young people's ability to build confidence and be brave. Youth Ops support young people thrive in a number of ways, but their main initiative is a 10-week face-to-face program. It includes group activities, personal coaching and even scholarships, which help young people to feel brave in getting outside their comfort zone.
Number one in our program is you've got to decide to be happy, and what that means for us is you've got to work out what your version of success is. And until you've worked that out, you don't know what you're aiming for.
Erin says the focus on each individual's experience through dedicated one-on-one time is a key point of difference between Youth Ops and other initiatives.
One of the things that we do really well is take those really complex concepts and use symbols and metaphors. We talk about stars and black holes. So we talk about a star being any positive communication to yourself or others that makes you feel more confident or better about yourself or makes the other person feel good. That's a star. And a black hole is the negative. And there's some really complex psychological theory going on behind this concept, but it's the kind of thing that people can get really easily. They can implement really easily. I'm going to send myself stars. I'm going to send my mum a star. I'm going to send my teacher a star. Oh, that was a black hole. I can feel myself feeling sadder. I can see that.
This approach is having a breakthrough effect, with Youth Ops recording a 53% reduction in the number of students at high risk of developing a mental health disorder.
96% of the young people who finish our program say that they've got higher levels of confidence, and that is a critical underlier of well-being and the resilience against mental health challenges.
Chloe is one of 13,000 Youth Ops grads and says the program helped improve her confidence to tackle life's hurdles. Youth Ops are committed to backing their grads with scholarships and have fully funded Chloe's health science degree.
I went into Youth Ops as quite a self-conscious person, and I didn't really believe that I was capable of much and wasn't very social. I had family conflict, so I learned a lot of techniques through Youth Ops and came out the end of it able to communicate a lot better through conflict. I was able to, time manage a lot better and also be a lot more confident in myself. Whether you're suffering conflict or have self-confidence issues or anything like that, everyone who goes into the program is going to walk out with something they didn't have before.
Wavelength, sparking the combos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That was Amy chatting with Erin from Youth Opportunities and Chloe, someone who's been through the program. Some really good insights, and Youth Ops are a really great organisation. If you want to find out more about them, just head to youthopportunities.com.au.
Wavelength.
And right now we're getting into our weekly segment where Wavelength explains what has happened with the coronavirus this week.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
In an unfortunate turn, while daily new cases continue to trend down, Victoria has reported its highest daily death toll today, with 25 people passing due to COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. Victoria also recorded a grim death toll yesterday with 16 deaths. The latest figures bring the state's death toll to 334 and raising the national toll to 421. Victoria's bungled hotel quarantine may have been preventable, with frontline doctors warning about the dangers of the state's quarantine program over a month before workers started catching COVID-19. However, the state's health department never responded to their concerns. Four Corners have uncovered emails that show the Australian Medical Association wrote to Victoria's Department of Health on April 15th, raising concerns about their infection control measures. Doctors were worried about COVID-19 patients who were forced to find their own way back to the hotel quarantine after being transported to the hospital in an ambulance for medical checks, often taking an Uber or a taxi. Earlier today, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced that the country will push back its scheduled September general election due to fears over COVID-19 transmission. The election is now scheduled to take place on October 17th. Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt is optimistic about the potential for a viable COVID-19 vaccine by 2021, confirming that Australia is in the advanced stages of negotiation with a range of companies to allow production to commence here in Australia. Mr. Hunt is unsure whether it'll be a partial vaccine similar to the flu jab that requires an annual update, or a full vaccine similar to the smallpox and measles vaccine that provide more universal coverage. And after being left high and dry, a new study has found that 59% of international students would not recommend for others to come and study in Australia. International students who remained here were ineligible for wage subsidies such as JobKeeper and JobSeeker. On the other hand, Australian students stranded in other countries such as the UK, Canada and Ireland were offered financial help. The study is of particular concern to our economy, with education being one of Australia's largest exports after mining and agriculture.
Wavelength, sparking the combos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
That there was Arj letting you know everything you need to know about the coronavirus. It's now 2 weeks, I think, since Victoria's gone into complete lockdown.
They're not even halfway through yet.
I know, and it's so rough.
Tough.
It's I think they, with the stage 3 before that and then stage 4 now, it's just been weeks and weeks. And
yeah.
weeks. I feel I hope there's some sort of light at the end of the tunnel for them.
I know, there's got to be, surely.
But they're still clocking over 300 cases a day, pretty much, and that's...
that is half of what they were recording, but that's still not saying a whole lot.
No, compared to places like Adelaide, where it's a bad day if we have one.
Yeah, we're losing our minds.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me about it. Everyone starts panic buying again.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? They have in New Zealand. I saw people in New Zealand because they've gone back in because they're getting new cases.
Yeah. They don't muck around, do they?
No.
Just one case and that's it. Shut up shop, man.
They got 13 as well over the weekend, and I think that they just want to get rid of it again.
Yeah. The thing that really weirds me out about the New Zealand thing is that they've gone 100 days without any cases. So you're thinking at this point, there's effectively no way that we can get any more. It just logically doesn't make any sense. And then bang, just like that, you know, as you said, 13 cases. And they don't even really know where they came from. No. It's almost like they just appeared out of thin air. It's just that's chill. Yeah. That's cool.
I think there's some theories about where it came from. Maybe I've read that maybe none of these are totally substantiated, but maybe it came from a cold storage facility in Melbourne, and then food or whatever got trucked over to shipped over to New Zealand, but that just shows how easily this thing goes.
Absolutely, I saw a story just this week that apparently a shipment of chicken wings from China were detected to have coronavirus in them. It's just what?
Really?
Yeah, serious, man. So I'm deleting Wish off my phone right now. But seriously, dude, the coronavirus has got no chill.
No, and it just it just like does not like care about country borders.
No. It does not discriminate. It's just what's that? That imaginary line? That doesn't exist.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Oh, well, hopefully we have a vaccine or something soon. Maybe the Russian one?
Yeah, that sounds good.
I reckon if you took it, you'd become some sort of super soldier.
Yeah, that's what it really is.
Wavelength.
Before we spoke all about the mental health crisis affecting young Australians, and it certainly can't help anyone that we go on and on here about all the bad stuff happening in the world. It's a little bit doom and gloom sometimes.
Yeah, that's why we do this weekly segment called Heaps Good News. This week, one of our newest reporters, Jamie, has taken the reins on the package.
I know there's gonna be Heaps Good News on Wavelength.
With an abundance of seemingly negative news, it's nice to be able to focus on the good stuff. News that sometimes falls off our radar in today's climate. There's always a heaps good news story out there, and this week, we're ready to brighten your day. Millions of litres of beers that expired in South Australian breweries during the COVID-19 pandemic has been converted into renewable energy. This groundbreaking renewable energy source is said to create enough energy to power approximately 1,200 of homes per week and is currently supplying energy for a wastewater treatment plant. West of Adelaide, the Glenelg Wastewater Treatment Plant has started using 150,000 litres of expired beer per week, an offset of reduced sales in the hospitality industry due to restrictions and regulations. But how does it work? Under high temperatures, beer biodegrades in large digester tanks using natural bacterial processes which release biogas. And voila! This biogas then generates electricity. I'll drink to that. You've heard of pigs in blankets, and now you've got lambs in jumpers. Perth resident Trish Lambkin has dedicated hours to knit hundreds of life-saving jumpers for lambs feeling the cold. Orphaned or rejected lambs cannot regulate their body temperature, and the jumpers help keep the lambs alive during winter. Mrs. Lambkin read a call out to knitters to make jumpers for orphaned lambs, so she picked up her needles, downloaded a pattern off the internet, and started knitting. Now stay with me on this one. A few weeks ago, Japanese-owned oil carrier ran aground off the southeast coast of Mauritius, spilling over 1,000 tonnes of oil. While this devastating wreckage has caused pollution to their coral reefs, white sand beaches and untouched lagoons, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Hundreds of amazing locals have come together to clean up the oil spill that is threatening their ecosystem. Over 500 tonnes of oil have already been manually collected by pumps, buckets and shovels. Through incredible innovation and resourcefulness, they have created absorbent barriers of straw and hair stuffed into fabric sacks. Check out non-for-profit Save the Reef and Kamagawa to donate. And thanks for listening to Heaps Good News.
Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Make sure you're subscribed to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and you'll be the first to know when tonight's episode goes up, so you feel really special.
You would feel really special. Get that notification on.
Wavelength.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.